Everyone talks about how to create pleasure. Almost no one talks about when. And that's why most intimacy peaks once and quietly dies right after, because the body doesn't shut down from lack of desire, it shuts down from bad timing. What if the reason pleasure stops isn't because it ended, but because it was interrupted? What if the secret isn't intensity, technique, or stamina, but knowing the exact moment to slow down instead of speeding up? Tonight, we're not talking about performance. We're talking about timing, the one invisible shift that changes intimacy from a single moment into an unfolding experience. You think intimacy is about technique. You think it's about skill, stamina, positions, or performance. But the truth is, intimacy doesn't break or bloom in the body first. It happens in the mind. And the biggest secret no one tells you is this: timing matters more than touch. Most people rush the moment that should never be rushed and delay the moment that should never be delayed. That one mistake alone decides whether intimacy feels forgettable or unforgettable. Let me be very clear. The human nervous system does not respond to pressure. It responds to safety, especially a woman's system. When safety is missing, the body may comply, but it will never fully open. And when the body doesn't open, pleasure stays shallow, mechanical, and short-lived. What people call lack of desire is usually just bad timing. There is a natural rhythm inside the body. Desire rises in waves. It peaks, it softens, it rebuilds. But most partners interrupt that rhythm because they are chasing an outcome instead of reading a response. They move faster when they should pause. They push forward when the body is asking for stillness. And then they wonder why intimacy feels incomplete. Here's the psychological truth most people miss. Pleasure deepens in the pause. When the body is allowed to stay at the edge, not rushed past it, the nervous system learns something powerful. It learns that pleasure is safe, that it doesn't need to brace, perform, or finish quickly. That's when the body stops protecting itself and starts surrendering. Timing is not about waiting longer for the sake of waiting. Timing is about recognizing when arousal has stabilized emotionally, not just physically. Because physical readiness can appear before emotional readiness. And if you ignore that, the body will shut down layers you didn't even know existed. This is why some people experience pleasure once and feel done, while others experience it in waves. It's not because of biology alone, it's because one experience was rushed to completion while the other was allowed to breathe. When desire peaks, most partners think that's the moment to intensify everything, faster, stronger, more. But psychologically, that's often the moment where slowing down creates more impact. Slowing down signals control. It signals awareness. And control creates trust. Trust is what allows the body to reopen again and again. The brain needs time to reset between peaks, not distraction, not abrupt change, gentle grounding, eye contact, touch that reassures rather than demands. This is what tells the nervous system, you're not being used, you're being experienced. Many people unknowingly collapse desire by asking too much too soon. The body responds by finishing quickly, not because it wants to, but because it's trying to escape pressure. That's not pleasure, that's relief. But when timing is respected, something different happens. The body doesn't shut down after release. It stays receptive, it stays warm, it stays open. That openness is what allows another wave to build, and then another. This is not about doing more. It's about interrupting less. It's about allowing the nervous system to complete its natural cycle instead of forcing an ending. Emotionally intelligent intimacy understands one thing. The body remembers how it was treated. If it felt rushed, it learns to protect itself next time. If it felt safe, it becomes more generous next time. That's why the strongest intimacy doesn't come from confidence alone. It comes from patience, from reading microsignals, breath changes, muscle softening, the moment when the body is saying, stay here instead of take me further. Most people miss that moment because they're focused on their own anticipation. But real connection requires regulation, not urgency. And here's the part that changes everything. When the body experiences pleasure without pressure, it doesn't need recovery the same way. It doesn't crash. It doesn't close. It reorganizes itself. That's when repeated waves become possible, not because something was done differently physically, but because something was honored psychologically. Timing is also emotional, how the day unfolded, how conversations were handled, whether the person felt seen or dismissed hours earlier. Desire doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in how emotionally safe someone felt long before. When emotional timing is off, no physical timing can fix it. But when emotional timing is right, the body responds in ways that feel almost effortless. This is why chasing techniques never works long term, because techniques ignore the nervous system, and the nervous system is the gatekeeper of pleasure. The real timing trick is knowing when not to push, knowing when to stay present instead of advancing, knowing when the body needs reassurance, not stimulation. And once the body learns that intimacy won't be rushed, won't be taken, won't be demanded, it stops resisting. It starts inviting. That's when intimacy stops being a single peak and starts becoming a sequence, not because of performance, not because of endurance, but because the mind felt safe enough to let the body open again. Most people are capable of far deeper pleasure than they've ever experienced. Not because they need to learn something new, but because they need to stop interrupting what's already there. Timing isn't about waiting for the right moment. Timing is about creating the right environment where desire doesn't feel chased and pleasure doesn't feel stolen. When that happens, the body doesn't shut the door after one experience. It keeps it open. And that's the difference between intimacy that ends and intimacy that unfolds. And most people don't realize how early they break the rhythm. They break it with impatience disguised as passion. They break it with urgency disguised as desire. The nervous system can tell the difference. It always can. The body knows when it's being rushed toward an outcome versus when it's being invited into an experience. There's a silent conversation happening beneath touch, between breath, muscle tone, and emotional memory. When timing is wrong, that conversation turns defensive. The body tightens subtly. Breathing becomes shallow. Pleasure becomes localized instead of expansive. And people mistake intensity for depth, not realizing depth requires time. Real intimacy respects the phase before arousal just as much as arousal itself, because anticipation is not about waiting. It's about warming the nervous system gradually. When anticipation is skipped, arousal spikes fast but collapses just as quickly. When anticipation is honored, arousal stabilizes. And stability is what allows repetition. This is why repetition isn't forced. It's allowed. The body repeats what felt safe. It resists what felt pressured. Another psychological mistake people make is assuming that release means completion. That's not how the nervous system works. Release is just a transition point. But if that transition is rushed, ignored, or emotionally disconnected, the system interprets it as end of experience instead of pause between waves. Timing after release matters more than timing before it. This is where most intimacy dies quietly. Abrupt changes, sudden disengagement, emotional absence right after vulnerability. The body remembers that moment more than the build-up. If the nervous system senses abandonment after opening, it will not reopen easily. But if it senses presence, warmth, and continuity, it doesn't close fully. It recalibrates, it breathes, it waits. This is not about doing something extraordinary. It's about not disappearing at the most sensitive moment. There's also a misconception that desire is always forward moving. It's not. Desire is cyclical. It expands, contracts, rests, then expands again. People who allow contraction without panic experience expansion again. People who panic at contraction push, and pushing ends the cycle. The timing trick is respecting contraction as part of pleasure, not as a failure of it. Emotionally mature intimacy understands that silence can be sensual, stillness can be stimulating, and slowing down can actually intensify sensation. The body needs moments to register pleasure before it can crave more of it. And here's what's rarely said out loud: the mind needs reassurance that it's not being measured. Performance anxiety kills repetition. The moment the body feels evaluated, it shifts into survival mode. Survival mode allows one peak, not many. When timing is right, there's no countdown, no pressure to get there. The experience becomes circular instead of linear, and circular experiences don't end the same way linear ones do. This is why some people feel suddenly tired after intimacy, not because they're weak, but because their nervous system was overactivated without being regulated. Regulation is the missing piece, and regulation is timing. Touch that regulates feels different. It's slower, it lingers, it doesn't escalate immediately. It lets the body catch up to the sensation instead of chasing it. When the body catches up, it doesn't crash afterward, it stays responsive. Another overlooked element of timing is emotional permission. Many people carry unconscious guilt around pleasure. When pleasure arrives too fast, guilt cuts it short. But when pleasure unfolds gradually, the mind adjusts. It normalizes the experience. It stops resisting. Normalization allows repetition. You cannot bypass emotional readiness and expect physical abundance. The body doesn't reward shortcuts. It rewards attunement. And attunement means noticing when excitement turns into overwhelm and pulling back just enough for the system to feel grounded again. That grounding is what allows another rise. People often confuse dominance with control. True control is restraint. It's knowing when to hold the moment instead of consuming it. The nervous system trusts restraint far more than force. Timing is also about endings that don't feel like endings. Soft transitions, continued connection, no sudden emotional drop-offs. When intimacy fades gently instead of collapsing, the body doesn't register loss. It registers completion without threat. That distinction matters. Threat creates closure. Safety creates openness. Repeated pleasure is not a physical talent. It's a psychological consequence of feeling safe enough to stay open. And the more the body experiences that safety, the faster it learns. What once took time begins to happen naturally, not because something new was added, but because nothing was rushed. The irony is that the more patient the experience, the more powerful it becomes. The more spacious it feels, the more intense it gets. Because intensity born from safety doesn't burn out. It builds. Most people are not lacking desire. They are lacking timing awareness. And until timing is respected, no technique will ever replace it. The body doesn't need to be pushed harder. It needs to be listened to longer. And listening requires humility. It requires letting go of the ego that wants to deliver an experience and replacing it with curiosity about what is actually happening in the moment. Because the moment is always speaking, through breath, through softness, through subtle withdrawal or deeper surrender. Timing is the ability to hear those signals without taking them personally. Most people mistake slowing down as losing momentum. In reality, slowing down is how momentum is sustained. The nervous system cannot sprint endlessly. It needs rhythm, expansion followed by grounding, stimulation followed by reassurance. When that rhythm is honored, desire doesn't disappear after one wave. It reorganizes itself. There is also a psychological safety that comes from predictability. Not routine, but emotional consistency. When the body knows it won't be abandoned emotionally after opening, it relaxes faster the next time. That relaxation shortens recovery and deepens responsiveness. Trust compounds. Another hidden factor in timing is permission to stop without consequences. When someone feels they can pause, slow down, or change direction without disappointing the other person, their body stays engaged. Pressure to continue creates resistance. Permission creates willingness. Willingness is where repeated pleasure lives. People underestimate how much emotional pressure exists even in silence. Expectations are felt even when they're not spoken. And the body responds to expectations by trying to finish the task. When there is no task, only presence, the body explores instead of escapes. Timing also means knowing when not to touch. Space can be as regulating as contact. Giving the nervous system a moment to integrate sensation allows it to crave more. Overstimulation without integration leads to shutdown, not satisfaction. The mind needs moments to catch up with the body. When the mind lags behind, the body finishes early. When the mind is present, the body stays available. This is why rushed intimacy often feels strangely empty afterward. The body arrived somewhere the mind never fully joined, and experiences that aren't fully registered can't be repeated easily. Repeated waves require full registration, awareness, presence, emotional attunement. There's a subtle confidence in someone who doesn't chase the peak, who isn't afraid of pauses, who understands that desire doesn't disappear when you stop pushing it. It deepens when you give it room. And that confidence is felt immediately. It tells the nervous system there's no emergency here. When there's no emergency, the body doesn't rush to finish. It stays curious. Curiosity is a powerful amplifier. It keeps sensation alive instead of goal-oriented. It transforms the experience from something to complete into something to explore. Another quiet truth is that the body doesn't like being surprised at its most open moments. Sudden changes, abrupt shifts, or emotional withdrawal right after vulnerability create microshock. Even if it's subtle, the nervous system notices. And next time, it will protect itself by shortening the experience. Consistency after openness builds capacity. Capacity is what allows more. Timing is also influenced by self-awareness. Someone who can regulate their own excitement, breathe through anticipation, and stay grounded creates space for the other person's system to unfold. Dysregulated energy spreads quickly. Calm spreads even faster. This is why presence is contagious. One regulated nervous system can guide another into safety. When safety is shared, the experience stops being transactional. It becomes mutual. Mutual experiences don't end abruptly. They taper, they pause, they resume. There's no rush in mutuality. There's responsiveness. And responsiveness is the true timing trick. Knowing when to continue, when to pause, when to soften, when to hold the moment exactly where it is. Not because of fear, but because of awareness. People who master timing don't look busy. They look calm. And that calmness allows the experience to keep unfolding instead of collapsing. The body doesn't need intensity all the time. It needs permission to stay open. So if there is one truth to walk away with, let it be this. Deeper pleasure is not unlocked by doing more. It's unlocked by rushing less. The body already knows how to respond, how to open, how to rise again. What shuts it down is pressure, urgency, and the need to reach an ending too quickly. Timing is respect in action. It's patience without weakness, control without force, presence without performance. When timing is honored, intimacy stops being a race to a peak and becomes a conversation that continues. The nervous system learns it is safe to stay, safe to feel, safe to reopen. And once the body feels safe, it doesn't just give once, It gives repeatedly, naturally, willingly, not because it was pushed, but because it was understood. This is the difference between intimacy that finishes and intimacy that transforms.